Hello, builders, and welcome to a new episode of the AWS SaaS Factory Presents Building SaaS on AWS, our little show here on Twitch for builders of SaaS going into AWS. My name is Anthony McClure, and I am a solutions architect with the AWS SaaS Factory. And I would like to welcome you all here today once again. If you are currently a builder of software as a service solutions, or even just getting started, learning how to design, build, deploy, and operate applications and solutions in multi-tenant environments, then this is the show for you. In every episode, we strive to bring in subject matter experts that can dive deep into the many varied topics and tasks related to building SaaS on AWS. And in today's show, we continue on with that. In fact, we are going to be jumping back to a topic that we first talked about a couple of shows back from now, and that is, how do we actually get paid for these great software as a solution services that we're creating and giving to our customers? Specifically today, I'm going to be joined by AWS partner Amberflo, and they are going to be discussing their metering and billing capabilities, and specifically again around that nebulous but something that everybody wants to have, that usage-based billing capability, and how we can tie that into your SaaS solutions. Along with that, we're also going to be talking about how Amberflo has been working with the AWS SaaS Factory to integrate their solution into the SaaS Factory's project that we've been working on, the SaaS Builder Toolkit. Now, before we get into that content, if you are joining me here live today on Twitch, please jump into chat, say hello, let us know where you're from. Are you currently building a software as a service solution? And make sure and say hi to Bill Tarr, who is once again acting as moderator for us today. If you have any questions for myself or my guest as we are going through our show today, you can put those into chat and we'll try to get to those as soon as we can as well. If you are joining after our live show, and you really should join those, you were probably watching this on our YouTube channel, also called Building SaaS on AWS, where we have this episode along with over 60 other episodes and many different SaaS-related topics. If you like this kind of content that we're bringing to you through AWS today, be sure and hit the follow button if you're in Twitch, and like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you're joining us from YouTube, so that you can be notified on any new episodes that we create. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into our content for today. First up, I'd like to bring to our stage Syed Hussain, a fellow SaaS Factory worker, along with myself, a fellow solutions architect. Welcome to the show, Syed.
Hey, Anthony. It's great to be here. I'm super excited. I know we have got great content and a great episode lined up today, so I'm super excited to dive in.
Awesome. Great. If you could, why don't you tell us just real quickly a little bit about the AWS SaaS Factory, who we are, what we do, and also how that ties in maybe to the SaaS Builder Toolkit and what's new in that world.
For sure. Yeah. So the SaaS Factory program, it's part of the AWS partner program, and basically what we do is we partner with SaaS builders, companies, partners out there, and then we sort of engage them kind of in a one-to-one relationship, and we help them build SaaS on AWS, right? And this could be basically diving into their specific use cases, coming up with best practices, and sort of working with them to sort of evangelize and advocate for those best practices, right? And then that's kind of one aspect of our job. Another very important aspect of our job, which is kind of related to this, is thought leadership, right? Where we go in and learn these new best practices, experiment, and then evangelize them, via blogs or actually Twitch streams like these, right? And the SaaS Builder Toolkit that you mentioned is actually one of those projects that the SaaS Factory has took on, right? I'm super excited to be talking about that as well. I know we got some slides there related to that, so I'm excited to jump in.
Very, very cool. Yes. In fact, let me. My slide share for some reason is not working, so maybe you just give an overview of SBT, and I'll see if I can bring it up real quick.
For sure. Let's go. Yeah, I mean, let's show must go on, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so the SaaS Builder Toolkit, for those that may have not have heard of it, basically is Our attempt at essentially codifying the best practices that we've learned over 7+ years that the SaaS Factory has been around, building SaaS on AWS with partners, and contributing to this thought leadership. And basically, SaaS Builder Toolkit is our attempt at codifying those best practices into something that a framework that builders can just use right out of the box, right? And the whole objective there is to enable these best practices by default, right? So it's not something that you have to consciously think about. And the example that I really like to give here is, for example, the distinction between the two planes that we often see in SaaS applications, the control plane and the application plane. With the SaaS Builder Toolkit, you get this sort of right out of the box, this sort of mental model. Yeah, that's actually perfect. Thank you, Anthony. That control plane, application plane, right? Sometimes builders, when they're maybe perhaps making their first SaaS applications, they might choose to kind of combine application plane and control plane responsibilities, which kind of leads to scalability issues later on, where you want to, for example, branch out into multiple accounts, multiple regions, and whatnot. And so with the SaaS Builder Toolkit, it's not something you have to consciously think of. The constructs that are provided as part of SaaS Builder Toolkit lend themselves very nicely to this delineation between the control plane and application plane. So down the road, when you hit that hockey stick of growth, and you're getting more customers than you can maybe count, you're still able to scale nicely and sort of accommodate all of those extra users coming in. And coming back to what you said about billing, you're still able to get paid for all of those extra users and customers that are coming to your door. So that's at a high level. That's kind of what SBT is. And one other aspect that's related to sort of our discussion here is that when it comes to building SaaS, nobody builds SaaS alone, right? One of the examples actually that Bill Tarr, who's here with us in chat, I've heard him give quite a few times is, when it comes to building, right? I think coming back to what he said about getting paid, it's unless you're building a billing provider yourself, you're likely not going to, build out those capabilities, right? For example, you want to be able to generate an invoice, figure out how tax affects the sales you're making, and another really important one is like handling, for example, billing information like credit card and PII. So that's something that you typically, unless you're kind of building a billing provider, that's not something you typically want to do. So that's where you might outsource into a third-party provider, and that's actually related, very much related to our call here, right? So in terms of kind of the plugins that we've created for SBT or SaaS Builder Toolkit, we have a host of plugins on the billing side, and then also I don't want to steal too much of the thunder here. We also have a brand new interface that we've added as part of SBT that allows metering solutions like the one we're going to talk about today, which is Amberflo, to plug in natively and sort of be there and available for builders to use right out of the box.
Very neat.
That kind of makes sense and gives you a bit of an update as to where we're at with SBT.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, Saeed. That's excellent. It's so great to see SBT kind of taking off. There's a lot of enthusiasm around it in the community as well as with our partners. And of course, seeing our current guests we're about to bring on, Amberflo, actually being involved and linking up their amazing billing solution with SBT. Just shows that it's it's really showing our customers how to do, from a best practices perspective, actual production level SaaS. So thank you for that introduction. And I think at this point it makes sense to go ahead and bring in our other guest as well. So I'd like to join with us today. First, we'll add Mr. Puneet Gupta, who is the founder and CEO of Amberflo. We also have Tala with us today, head of engineering of Amberflo. Welcome to both of you. Let's start out with some quick introductions here. And Puneet, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Amberflo.
Sure, yeah. By the way, just super excited to be here today. Thank you to all three of you, Bill, Anthony, and Syed. Great to be here. Can't wait to share the content with the audience. A little bit about ourselves. Myself, I'm a founder, CEO of Amberflo.io, company about 4 years in, venture backed. As you already mentioned, we do metering and billing at a tenant level. Usage-based pricing and billing is part of that. Just a little bit about me. I'm actually an ex AWS. I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I was there in the early days, joined AWS back in 2011, and uh, you know, had a phenomenal time with the team out there. My team launched Amazon Cloud Search, Amazon Elasticsearch. So quite
Nice.
simply, that's where I cut my teeth into the world of metering and usage-based pricing and billing. So this is almost like a homecoming for me. So super excited. Let me hand it over to Tala to introduce himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Tala, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And yes, my name is Talha Aftab. I am the founding engineer and now the head of engineering at Amberflo. And previously, I've worked at Informatica and Savo, a startup that worked in collaboration with Salesforce. And really excited to present how you can ingest metering events into Amberflo from a technical angle.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Welcome as well, Tala. So diving right into our content for today then. So we're talking about usage-based billing, right? And billing in general, but as it relates to SaaS, but specifically about usage-based billing. And usage-based billing has been around with us for a while. It's certainly nothing that is brand new to the scene as it stands. We have other customers, Twilio and Snowflake and others that have had it at some level or degree for quite a long time. But we're seeing actually our customers coming to us that are wanting to build SaaS that are talking a lot about usage-based billing. It comes up constantly these days, above and beyond, of course, that kind of traditional subscription-based model that we're all used to, and maybe the license per seat. So, do you also see this? Is this a newer trend that you're seeing, kind of catching fire here? And why is there more urgency around usage-based billing today than maybe it was in the past?
Yeah, Anthony, definitely seeing an uptake. Quite frankly, that was sort of the thesis of starting Amberflo. We're about 4 years in into this journey. I'll maybe just quickly share with you what the original thesis was of why this was inevitable in our minds. And I think why we're now seeing that sort of hockey stick take on, because there have been some catalyst, I think, that we've seen just even in the last year or two. So the thesis of why this was going to happen is, our view has been that as more and more workloads shift to the cloud by nature is elastic, right? I mean, that's a matter of fact. You consume cloud on an elastic basis, on a consumption basis, on an on-demand basis. So our view had been that if your backend is elastic on the infrastructure that you're standing up, whatever it is that you're building, if your foundation is elastic, then in the fullness of time, however you project your prices and services to your customers must also be elastic for you to really drive operational efficiency in the middle. Okay. So that was sort of the broad standing, think about sort of 30,000, 50,000 foot view, even 4 or 5 years back, where we were not today where we are. And we could not have told you 4 years back that, there was going to be a catalyst in the form of GenAI LLM that's going to land, in a year or two, where that's going to further sort of light the fire on this acceleration towards usage-based pricing and billing. So now I don't think there isn't a company out there that hasn't thought about how they want to factor in some flavor of GenAI LLM. And guess what? GenAI LLM is going to be consumed on an elastic basis, on a consumption basis. And if you're building that into your core stack, I think you will find that you will have elements of usage-based pricing to consider to bring your products and services forward. All right. So no longer $99 per user per month is going to work, because the workloads are going to scale. How people consume your services is going to vary drastically. You're going to have to put some protections against that, and the only way to do that is through usage-based pricing and billing. So yeah, definitely seeing a huge uptick on that front.
So in your viewpoint, then, this continued movement of workloads to the cloud, the usage-based billing aspect of the cloud, that pay-as-you-go model, people are more and more used to it at this point, and the services that are coming in, especially something like GenAI, which is usage-based just by its nature, passing those costs on to your customers, or as part of the cost to your customers, just seems like a logical extension, and that's kind of how everybody's come to this.
Exactly. And I think, the trend has already been there, as you called out, Twilio, Snowflake, right? We've seen, if you may want to call them sort of the first gen companies after the hyperscalers, after the Amazons and the Googles of the world and the Azures, right? We saw the next batch, Twilio, Snowflake, Databricks. But we had been seeing it sort of primarily in the PaaS layer, right? Platform as a service companies, MongoDB, all of these guys. Okay, they're notch closer to infrastructure. Infrastructure is elastic, as I mentioned, so they were naturally already going towards a usage-based pricing and billing model. SaaS has sort of been the holdout for a while, right? People were not kind of sure, will usage-based pricing work there? But now we're seeing, LLMs, Gen AI, ML in general. I mean, it's just rippled through.
It's acted like a forcing function, basically. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge forcing function. And I think there's more to come, if you ask me, right? I think Gen AI, LLM, I think it's just, again, just the first wave. And we don't know what it is, but maybe some further abstraction of this or some extension of this. But I think there's more coming in terms of additional artifacts that developers and businesses will have to contend with. But the train is moving rapidly in the direction of usage-based pricing and billing. And by the way, within that, there's a debate, pure play usage-based versus, hybrid. We don't have our take is hybrid model is a perfectly viable usage-based business model, right? Where you want to say $4.99 a month includes X amount of A and Y amount of B, right? And then, but if you go over X amount of A and Y amount of B, then I have an overage charge or I have an on-demand charge for you. That is totally in a viable usage-based business model, right?
And that billing in arrears kind of situation.
Exactly, yeah. Billing in the arrears. Another popular framework that even AWS uses is, or you can do prepaid, what's called prepaid with drawdown. This tends to be a big thing for finance in particular. As you scale your company, finance particularly wants to have visibility into some kind of forecasting and budgeting so they know what they can collect from a customer. So prepaid is a great model, also usage-based model. Pay me, $100,000 upfront, draw down on a monthly basis based on actual metered use. And then we'll sort of keep track of that and then renew you up as you draw down against it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when we're talking, obviously this is related ultimately to billing and getting paid, right? So the hard part of this, though, is kind of the metering aspect to this, right? So why do we believe, though, that metering is kind of like this foundation that has to be there before we can even begin to consider usage-based billing?
Yeah, this is, I think, this itself is a fascinating topic. I think more and more people are sort of realizing or unpacking the nuances of this or arriving at this thesis that, metering really is the foundation, is the starting point. In fact, I'll share an anecdote that I got coached on when I first joined AWS, where as we were building our services and then moving them towards production and launch, obviously we had to build our pricing models and bring them to production. And I will never forget that I was coached that, you don't work your way backwards from billing into metering. You work your way forward from metering into billing. Okay. Let me unpack that for the audience, what that means, because it's profound. I mean, if you just get that right, you're essentially set for life. Okay. And what that's telling you is in a elastic cloud world, metering is the superset. When you are building a product, a service, or application or platform, start with metering. You don't know what your pricing plan, what the optimal pricing plan is going to be, or what it should be even. Okay. But metering is...
you won't, right? Until it's tested by the market, you really don't know.
You really don't know, right?
Educated.
Exactly. So that's the thesis where it's saying you don't just throw something out there, see if it sticks. The tool for experimentation and to lead you towards finding that right and optimal pricing plan is metering. So start with metering. And metering is basically this magical tenant level tool that you can deploy early on into your development cycle. As you're developing, as you enter alpha, as you enter beta, to start collecting usage patterns. That's why I call metering. It meters how your users are using your product. And the thesis is meter exhaustively. Don't just be restricted by, I'm only going to charge on storage. I'm only going to charge on LLM tokens. That's what I mean by working your way backwards from billing to metering. That's not correct. Go from metering to billing. Meter exhaustively anything you can think about that you wish to instrument that your users are interacting with holistically. Metering will then give you a usage report, real-time analytics, what the patterns are, how they trend with time, how they trend with usage. And from there, you'll start to get signals on what might be the right charge vectors for you to base your pricing on. And then you move into billing and then put a rate model against those meters and then construct the deployment side of your metering on some of these artifacts that we talked about, whether it's going to be pay as you go or prepaid with drawdown or fixed with overages, any combination.
Yeah, one thing that I would just kind of double click on there is, you mentioned right in the development cycle, right? And just coming back again, because, we're all, I think to some extent, we're all technical here. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to sort of a technical audience where, as the product, as the business folks are thinking about these thinking about these sort of pricing plans, we don't necessarily want engineers and builders to go back into the code every time to make minor modifications just to fulfill another business need when it comes to pricing or a new a model that we're testing out, right? And that's kind of really why metering is so important. You gather all of these metrics, you ship it off into one location, and then from that location you're able to kind of the business folks, the product folks, they're able to kind of come in and figure out what pricing plan actually makes sense for the market, instead of going to the engineering folks and say, hey, can you try this, can you try that? And then that just kind of slows down their velocity, right, in terms of shipping out new features that are that customers might be looking for, right? So I just wanted to sort of double click on that. I think that's a very important kind of minor thing, but it's very important when it comes to kind of the long-term view of the software development lifecycle.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Syed, I mean, great example. In fact, I think Tala will uncover that as we go into the hands-on demo. What you just outlined, a metering platform system built right should and will give you that flexibility. So we'll actually show an example. In fact, one of the things we're going to show is, let's say you want to meter LLM input and output tokens. You should only need one meter to meter all, let's say, output tokens across any and all LLMs that you wish to use today and tomorrow, across any vendor, across any version, across any zone, across any region. You shouldn't have to deploy, hundreds of different meters. One metering interface should be flexible enough that it gives you that flexibility today and into the future. So we'll unpack that as we get underway a little bit.
Awesome.
Yeah. One thing that I think it's important to bring up here as well is that metering is different than monitoring, right? I think in general, when we sit in front of customers, especially engineering teams, and we start talking about metering and analytics or metrics and analytics in general, their immediate thought is, okay, how do we monitor what's going on with our infrastructure, with the network, with the flow of traffic, are things working the way that they're supposed to from that level? But metering is different than that traditional monitoring. Using stacks like Logstash and Prometheus and Dynamics can do some of this, right, as far as giving you these dynamics. But how do you see that metering is different than traditional monitoring?
Anthony, another great question. So glad you asked, because this is also one of the sort of the holdouts, and people kind of stumble onto this. So here are a couple of things. Let me just first put some data points. Okay, so more than anything that I'm going to say or that you're going to read up, I think the data speaks for itself. So look across the companies that we just talked about, not just the hyperscalers, but the next batch of the Databricks and the Snowflakes and the Mongos, and now just about others, and your Twilios and the SaaS layer. All of these companies you will find eventually ended up building a metering infrastructure, before they could buy one off the shelf, right? So therein lies the evidence that, maybe they started off life with using monitoring or observability, because that's sort of like for engineers, that's like holding a hammer in their hand, right? Observability,
right.
Monitoring, for those tools. Okay,
everything's the nail, right? Just hit that nail.
No, it's a great starting point. But here's the kicker. So I just wanted to kind of lay out that evidence. You can go unpack that on LinkedIn, and if you look at those companies somewhere, you can talk about it. All of them, once they started to achieve a level of scale, or even early on, they instituted and started to build an a la carte metering service. And here's the reason. First is the first candidate that's going to ask for meter data is pricing and billing. So while you work your way forward from metering to billing, the requirements really start to come from pricing and billing, right? In a usage-based world, or even in a hybrid world, we got to start generating metered on-demand invoicing for our customers. We need to
Mhm.
start metering. Okay, why cannot you do it through observability or monitoring? See, the thing is, metering by definition is an accurate system of record. When I mean by accurate, the design principles, the tenets of building a metering service are idempotency and data deduplication.
Mhm.
Guaranteed accuracy. Okay. Monitoring does not give you that. Observability does not give you that. Idempotency, data deduplication at the event level. Why is this important? Why is this a design principle of a metering service, not necessarily of a monitoring observability? Because you are going to feed this data into pricing and billing. You have to be accurate. You cannot just say, oh, I can drop an event here and there and then pass it on to billing, because what's going to happen, there's going to be an issue on the billing side. Somebody's going to complain, or you're going to discover, or there's going to be a revenue recognition problem. And then you're going to have to work your way backwards on what happened, where did the event got dropped, who's responsible, was it engineering, was it this, we have lost it, we don't know where it is. So that kind of a mess is what then triggers people to actually eventually go ahead and build a metering service.
Yeah, but now you're behind the game, right? You're trying to play catch up at this point.
Now you're trying to play catch up, not to mention the whole fiasco with customers. In fact, some of our early customers that we got were precisely those customers who had been burnt by this. And they had the mea culpa moment with their customers that they send them wrong invoices, or, they were getting slapped on the wrist that things were not being, recognized properly. And they needed an accurate metering service so that they could rely on a source of truth, a system of record for usage and consumption data, period, box, right? And in perpetuity. So it's not, munged with your data lake. You can take stuff out from the metering system of record, as we will present, and put it somewhere else. But you do need a source of truth that you can go back to once and for all, that yes, if metering says that this is what the usage was, then this is what the usage was.
And tenant, another really hot topic that is kind of tangential to this, but is still really important, is that whole aspect of trying to figure out cost per tenant, right? We're constantly getting bombarded. How do we do cost per tenant? How do we do cost per tenant? It all starts with metering. There's no free lunch here. You have to do the metering first before you can even begin to do those associations.
For sure, you'll see it, and hopefully, if there's one takeaway folks can get, we'll show a lot about billing and all that, but metering really is the starting point. You have to get your act together on metering. I cannot overemphasize this. And once you do, doors will open, as you just said. Once you get a system of record for usage and consumption data, guess what? Now you can put a cost rate model on that usage.
Right.
And now you get basically the cost profile at a tenant level, at a customer level, which has really been sort of the fleeting,
It's
thing.
like the holy grail thing
Holy
everybody's
grail.
reaching for, right? Yeah.
Exactly, right? Because everybody's trying to do that, from parsing the bill on the back end and all that. The question folks should ask is, how does AWS generate that bill for me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just pause for a second and just ask yourself this question. There's a whole economy that parses the bill. Ask the question, what must AWS be using to generate that bill? And why cannot I have that technology? That is metering. Metering is what's generating that bill, and you can have it. You can deploy your own metering stack, and you don't have to wait for the bill. Bill was never designed to give you that level of fidelity at the tenant level. People are trying to munch all kinds of things. Metering is the interface, and therefore, the partnership with, Syed's team and your team on the SBT framework, that has been sort of the holy grail. I'm using cloud, I'm using LLMs. I want to be able to track at a tenant level, what is the consumption? What is the usage? Bill is not going to give you that. Metering is going to give you that. And once you have it, you can slice it any different way for cost, for billing, and for internal analytics.
Yeah, and just one thing I would add there again, cost per tenant, right? That's really important, especially when it comes to kind of figuring out what your pricing model looks like, right? At the end of the day, as a SaaS vendor, you don't want to, necessarily lose your shirt as you offer your services, right? Yeah. So when it comes to, that hockey stick of growth that we all really want to see, you want to make sure that that's a profitable growth, not right. I mean, not something that you're just racking up a huge bill for, and you don't really have a whole lot to show for it, right? So that cost per tenant is how you kind of is one factor that goes into your pricing model, right? And that's a very important factor, because at the end of the day, these services that you're using, they generate a bill, and you want to make sure that the services you're offering as a SaaS vendor, at least covers those bills, and then whatever else is necessary. So again, that's very important. It sometimes gets overlooked, but it's absolutely crucial for the sustainability of your business.
Exactly.
And I know we've been focusing a lot on the metering aspect because it's so foundational to actually doing billing correctly. But when it comes to the actual billing portion of this, there are certainly other billing services that are available, customers may be familiar with, such as like Stripe, for instance. But does Amberflo also solve the payments part of this equation as well, Puneet?
Yeah, so we are a full-featured, fully managed metering, pricing, rating, and billing service. But let me draw the distinction. So we, as I mentioned, we do all of that. You'll see that in just a few minutes. We'll take you through a demo. And where we draw the line for us versus, let's say, a payments provider. So we integrate with a payments gateway or a payments provider like Stripe. So if you are working with Amberflo, all you need is a payment provider, which is pretty typical. So we will route the payment, let's say, through Stripe. Stripe is a first-party integration for us. Stripe will collect the money and do the payments transaction, but the entire invoicing, metering, rating, price book, customer invoicing flow is all within Amberflo.
Nice. So I know, of course, that there's certainly other partners that we work with that handle maybe the metering aspect of it, but one differentiator I think for Amberflo is that extra step, right, where you can execute against that metering and then go execute a bill or an invoice against your payment processor.
100%, yeah. I believe we are unique in this regard. Full-featured metering. We consider metering as a horizontal platform. So you'll see we're really truly the first full-scale, highly scalable. We'll talk a little bit about the scale that we're already ingesting on our metering service. So full-featured metering platform. And then we have a series of applications that we build on top of our metering cloud. And pricing, rating, and billing is obviously the first application. And within that, full-featured capabilities of any which way you want to build these pricing plans and present to your customers and collect revenue on the backs of that.
Excellent. For those of you that may be joining us late, you are jumping into Building SaaS on AWS. And we are talking here today with some members or people from Amberflo, a partner of AWS, then a partner with the AWS SaaS Factory. They provide billing and metering solutions for SaaS and other software development platforms or products. And we are seeing how we can work with Amberflo today. In fact, I think this is probably a pretty good segue, maybe to start moving around and seeing something actual from a demo perspective. Does that sound good?
Sounds awesome.
Awesome. So Tala, I think you may be taking over a little bit here, but when we're starting out with this entire process, if I'm thinking about it just kind of logically from a developer standpoint, we know we need to do metering. So how do we do that? Right? What does a metering event even look like?
So yeah, absolutely. That is something that I will uncover in my demo, and I will basically try to explain what a meter event is, and then the life cycle of the meter. So from the point of ingestion to the point where you can query aggregated usage, and how you can fit that into your billing and cost and internal chargebacks, all the different downstream use cases, basically.
Awesome. So if we're getting started with this, I would imagine there are certain rules or things that we need to keep in mind, whether it's specifically for Amberflo, but maybe even just metering in general. So what are those tenants, or what are the things that we should keep in mind as we're starting to think about this from an engineering perspective?
So from an engineering perspective, first of all, understanding what is a meter event and how is it different from all the other type of meterings, right? So for example, you have the observability space, or metrics or analytics that you get from, say, Prometheus in Kubernetes, right? So understanding that a meter event is essentially an instance of measuring the usage of a service, resource, or a product, at a tenant level. So that is what distinguishes Amberflo. And this is a problem that is too familiar to any SaaS or PaaS provider, right? And so you want to track your API calls, computational resources such as CPUs, memory, containers, data consumed, stored, transferred, transactions, logins, active users. And I would also like to say it's not just like system or technical resources that you want to track. You can also track biz ops resources such as projects, tickets, human resources, and so on. So anything that can be tracked or measured, we can do it.
Nice. So how do we actually go about doing that?
That is a great question, and I would love to answer that question.
So we can either go through a couple of slides as a tee-up,
Sure.
Anthony, and then we'll do. So are the slides being shared? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Very cool. Let me move through just a few of these slides just to tee up what we're going to show you, as Tala mentioned, a hands-on lab on how to create meters, how to ingest meters. Anyways, yeah, this is basically the agenda that we had today. So there's a lot to cover. We're actually going to walk you through all of these areas as we were just discussing on the metering side. And then once you have put in your metering infrastructure with Amberflo using the SBT framework, you can then immediately start to see tenant level cost analytics. And from there, we can actually go on and build customer facing billing. By the way, one thing to note is we are a decoupled platform. We like to call it, yet integrated, which means that you can start, certainly encourage you to start with metering, but you can skip over cost and go directly to billing. Or you can just go with cost and stay there for a while and then go to billing, depending on the stage that your company's at. So there's a lot to cover here. Let me just maybe cycle through a couple of slides just to give you a little bit of orientation about the platform. These are some of the customers we have, public companies, private companies on the platform. Very proud of this aspect, of course, our heritage from AWS, but also just to give you a size of scale of the platform already today for us. 500 billion meter events being ingested on a monthly basis. So it's prime time. It's really designed for scale. This stuff we already talked about, really from left to the right. Starting point is metering. You will see us harp on this again and again throughout the demo. Tenant level metering, customer level metering. That really is the starting point. You get that situated, everything to the right, the door opens up for you. Okay.
Yeah, just quickly Puneet, if you could just quickly double clicking on the tenant level, right? I mean, when it comes to building SaaS, obviously tenant level reporting in general is very, very important. And when it comes to these metering events, like Puneet and Tala are mentioning, tenant level is very important as opposed to sort of aggregate level, right? So one of the things you'll need to work out very early on is how do you grab and ascertain exactly tenant level usage, right? And we put on a lot of content around that, so definitely look into that, search into that. But that's like a fundamental sort of building block before services like Amberflo can come in and provide that real value, because tenant level usage is just that important, right? So make sure you have that in place first, and then Amberflo can chip in and provide that value that you're looking for.
That's right, and that's the iMetering interface that we built together with you guys. So, and this is yet another way to look at it. Increasingly, your stack to the left is becoming more and more hybrid. It's becoming more and more varied. We talked about the AI LLM that's suddenly landed on the scene, but this is going to continue to change, evolve. You'll see to the left more and more "quote unquote" metered items becoming part of your IT stack. Okay, but there isn't yet a sort of an enterprise-wide, a standardized interface to meter usage across all of these varied components in a standardized way, right? You can imagine why a bill will not scale, because you may get individual bill from any number of vendors for any one part of the stack. And I think that is sort of falling flat, and that's where customers are struggling. So you need to take ownership of metering, usage tracking, your own usage of your own customers, and the iMetering interface metering is your tool for that. And once again, as also I think Syed, what you just said, so once you have that in place, then you can start on to move, as Atala was saying, downstream, whether it'll be cost tracking, customer facing billing, internal usage analytics. All of those doors start to open up. Okay. All right, so let's go right into metering and onto the demo flow. This is basically how we're going to show you how you can build out your applications, your path toward customer-facing billing. So if we start from the bottom up, we're going to start with metering, define some meters, ingest meters, and you can just stay there. Like I said, if you're early in your development cycle, see what those patterns are, okay? Then move upstream into our stack, then build customer-facing billing, or go left, do cost cloud management, or both in parallel. That's sort of how the flow is, okay? And these are the building components. These are the application services that Amberflo provides. Metering, done right, this is what you need. Meter any resource at any scale with custom attributes. You'll see what we mean by that in just a second. And be able to track not near real time, but real time usage aggregation and analytics. That is a metering service, doing that for you consistently and accurately. Okay. And anything, whether it's LLM, Tala already mentioned all of the different things you can track. So let me turn it over to Tala. He's going to basically unpack this slide for you. On the left, we're going to define some meter events. You'll see the schema and the flexibility within that, and some of the attributes that are important. As those events flow into the Amberflo metering pipeline, this is what the pipeline is. This is what Amberflo does for you: meter ingestion, data deduplication, aggregation, giving you a system of record and a real-time tenant level aggregation and analytics. Tala, over to you. And I understand we got to go fast.
Yeah.
We come up on time.
Time flies, I tell you. I tell it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Can you share my screen?
Sure.
Okay, great.
There
So
we go.
what are the tenets of metering? So metering needs to be accurate. So the platform serves as a source of truth. So we maintain a time stream of accurate, unaltered usage events. This is very important. The second thing is that it's idempotent. We process an event exactly once, not multiple times, and it will not be unprocessed either. Then, because in highly distributed systems, there's redundancy and sometimes you have failures, so duplicate data may arise. So in that case, we ensure that the duplicates are eliminated for data integrity purposes. Now let's examine a meter event. So we need an identifier to identify your meter that you're trying to track. Then you have the customer ID, which is a first-class citizen in our system, and this is what enables tenant level usage tracking. Then the amount, the usage amount, and time stream, or time is also a dimension of the meter event. So you pass us the timestamp of when this event occurred in your system. So independently, Amberflo also tracks the ingestion time. So you provide us the event time and we track the ingestion time. And if the ingestion time is in the past, that is considered a backfill, which is something that we support. Optionally, you can also send us a unique ID if you later want to track your meter events. Now, this is what gives our customers a lot of flexibility, and that's called dimensions. And these are custom properties that can be used to filter or group events for usage aggregation purposes. And downstream, they can also be used to configure pricing rules and drive billing behavior. And it also enables a dynamic event schema. So dimensions can be resource types. So for example, you have the cloud, AWS, Google, Azure, and so on. Then you have the region, then the Gen AI models, instance, so any type of resource that you want to track. Then you can also use a dimension for resource ID. So you have a cluster ID, user ID, database ID, and so on. So this example here is for Gen AI input tokens. So for example, some of the dimensions that would make sense is it batched? What model are you using? The region where your service is being hosted, the provider, it could be Anthropic, it could be Llama, and so on. Is it fine-tuned, and what is the use case? So you can use all these different dimensions later to, drive your billing.
It's like filter and sort also, and dig into the data.
Exactly. Yes. So you can slice, dice, filter, group by, and so on. Okay, so this is output tokens, and then here's an example of API calls. You may want to track the service, the region, the cloud that you're using. Then you have something called server connection seconds. In that case, you may want to track the SDK or the relay ID and logins, unique user logins. Okay, so once you've identified the meter event, the next step is to create a meter definition in our system. So think of it as a class definition. And so you define the you provide an identifier, the meter API name, and then the type of meter. In this case, it's a count meter, and then all the dimensions that you want to track. And that's it. This is your entire meter definition here. And we also support long-lasting or continuous meters, such as duration or storage. Okay, so once you've ingested events, you've defined your meter metadata, the next step is you can query usage. So query usage looks as follows. So you provide the dimensions, so you group by certain dimensions. So any of the dimensions that are present in your meter definition, you can group by them. And then you can also filter on those dimensions. And you provide a meter API name. And since this is a time stream, you need to provide a time range. And essentially, your select statement would look like the dimension. And then the aggregation has two parameters. One is the interval and the function type. So this is our usage event. Now, you can ingest meters into Amberflo either using our API. So we're a developer-first platform. Any feature in our system is accessible via the API. Then you can either use our SDKs or you can drop files in S3. So our SDKs help manage auto or manual ingestion, batching, debugging, and the frequency. The ingestion file formats that we support are JSON, ND-JSON, and CSV. We built, from an integration point of view, an SBT SAS Factory implementation for the iMetering interface that we partnered with AWS. And essentially what you can do is you can plug it into your AWS event bridge and start ingesting events into Amberflo in real time. Okay, what are the ingestion patterns? You can either do it at real time at the source, or you can have a cron or an ETL job that queries your database, or you can have a heartbeat where you periodically pull different nodes or services, or asynchronously, you can just drop logs. And we do provide direct integration with CloudWatch logs using Stream. Okay, so performance and volume send us billions of events daily. So what I'm going to do now is go through the example of using our TypeScript and our SBT module, where we implement the iMetering interface was created using this SDK here. So the first step is to identify the so the first thing is that you configure your SDK here. So you identify the batch size and the frequency, and then basically you take your open AI response here. So you can see that this is you can use this as a unique ID. You can potentially use the object type as a dimension, and then meter time in millis is when the event occurred or the created, and then you have the model, and then these are potential usage values that you can use, the prompt and the completion tokens. And here you construct this, you query usage later, and here I will show a demo of where you can interact with your open AI and then essentially ingest events. So essentially what's happening is you can see that these events are getting queued. They're not sent to the server yet because we've set a timeout of 1 second. And after that timeout is reached, then at that point, you'll see that we are posting it to the API. This is the response received back from the API, 202 records ingested. And then this is the response returned by the usage query. So this is the original query. And then these are all the time intervals. And then for each group, we have an entry here. And then for each time interval, we provide the usage aggregated value. Yeah. And then this is like a graceful shutdown of our SDK.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It looks really easy to use.
Yes, that was the idea. And then finally, you can also correct meters because mistakes are going to happen. There's going to be outages. So we have this concept of event filtering that basically you can configure a rule and cancel or delete events from usage.
Yeah. So. And Anthony, if you can switch back to my slides.
Sure.
Just one more thing I'll add to.
I think your screen share finished, Puneet.
Tala, yeah, if you can stop your screen share.
Okay.
One of the things I'll just adding to what Tala called out, the fact about having customer ID as a quote unquote first class citizen in the meter definition. Just to unpack that a little bit more for the audience, compared to, let's say, monitoring observability or let alone downstream billing extraction, because this is your interface, you are in control. We're giving you the metering platform and artifact. You have access to this API endpoint. You are in control, so you can inject these events or extract these events wherever in the code you are at, where you are making a call to a resource. And at that moment in time, you will have the attribution in the code on whose behalf is this call, originating.
The tenant ID and
Tenant
yes,
ID, exactly.
Yep.
And that's why the tenant ID then becomes part of the meter event flow. And from there, you can essentially start to see the distillation and analytics across. Let me go through, show you sort of all of this.
Maybe while the slides are coming up.
Yeah. There we go.
It's
coming up. There we go.
Oh, there it is.
All right. So yeah, let's go forward. I'm going to go through this quickly. So we promised we're going to talk about, now that we have metering, how can I track cost at the tenant level? So we're going to unpack some of these things. I'm actually going to show you this in the UI in the console, what this looks like. At the tenant level, cost tracking, you can even then go down to the margin level, margin analysis between the revenue you're generating on the backs of billing and the cost that you are incurring for that tenant. We'll, of course, talk about billing. Lots there to cover. I'll sort of touch at the high level, but if folks are interested, we're happy to come back and take a deeper dive. So let me switch over to the product and the platform demo. This is Amberflo console, much like AWS. We've come into the Amberflo platform, and I've landed on the metering side of the house. So Tala just walked you through different meters. Here's in this demo, we have some sample meters that are created, as you have hopefully understood. It's really your domain. Whatever it is that you wish to track and meter, we are domain agnostic. As long as that event has a date and timestamp that you wish to attribute to a tenant ID and track over a time stream, over a period of time, it's a candidate for metering. And the reason you want to figure that out, whether it's a metering versus monitoring, do I want to do this accurately? Would this have an impact downstream to pricing, billing, or some other aspect of analytics that I never have to deal with this again, or have being called into question, is this data accurate or not? Okay, so those are your candidates. Let's unpack maybe the meter that Tala just talked about. For example, here's a meter event for tracking output tokens for LLMs. And notice here, as I said earlier, you just have to define one meter called output tokens, and you can essentially track against any LLM provider, version, model name, region. You can add to this metadata list of dimensions. And as these events flow in, you can immediately go to the usage dashboard, and you can see real-time usage aggregation against that meter. Okay, so let's actually.
We have a quick question from the audience as well, and of course we would love for you to be all in on AWS, but is your service only for AWS services, Kiva?
No, we are cloud agnostic, and that's again the reason why we feel that there's this awareness that we're also trying to evangelize. Once you have your metering interface, this is your metering interface. So you can meter any artifact of any system from any cloud provider from any place, anywhere. And if you look at the slide that I shared earlier on the left-hand side, I mean, increasingly, Anthony, it's a hybrid cloud world. So people are running workloads across different cloud providers. People are also, dropping things on premise yet again, for LLMs, open source LLMs and whatnot. So yeah, we are totally cloud agnostic. You can meter S3, you can meter Azure resources, you can meter Google resources. It's your interface.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you can send the API request, like Tala was saying, it's a developer-friendly platform. So as long as you can send the API request, regardless of where it's coming from, you should be able to, meter and bill.
Exactly.
So on and so forth.
So here we're unpacking the output tokens. So now I am looking at the output tokens, the aggregated events. We give you full time stream. You can go back in time, select any custom time window. You can go as far as back in years. It's a full time stream baked analytics in real time. Now, of course, the magic is, I can, of course, distill this down at the tenant level, as we've been talking about. So here you have it. Output tokens across the LLMs for a specific customer. And I can also further distill this down by additional dimensions, as we saw in the meter definition. So if I wanted to see which model, across which models for this tenant, the calls have been routed or have been used, you can see that in real-time basis. This truly is a real-time accurate system giving you aggregation for metering. Any number of dimensions, in this case, if we had a region, you would also do a distill down against region for where that LLM call was based, right? So this full flexibility, this is automatic. However you define the meter schema, definition, and dimensions, you can come into the usage dashboard and drill down across full time stream at a tenant level and a combination of dimension level to the usage. So that's your metering side. Let's go on and move on to now. I've got the metering data coming in. We have a system of record for usage and consumption data in the form of the metering service. Now I want to see at this tenant level, what is the cost, right? So what did the LLM actually costed me as a company? So I can actually put a cost rate model on the output token meter. And you can basically input whatever the charge vector is. So for example, here, we've just put in the public pricing that's available for these different models. It could be the pricing that you've negotiated with the vendor. You have the capability to input these pricing rates. That's all it takes to put the pricing rates, and notice the combination. So, provided the pricing rate tables are multidimensional, right? Model version, maybe the region or the provider. So you can basically construct this rate table. Once you have built this rate table, you can come into the cost dashboard, and you can essentially see the cost profile being also generated in real time. But this is really where the magic is. So at a customer level, I can basically see how much for each customer did I pay the underlying LLM provider or S3 charge or the AWS cloud provider. You can really build this out holistically. Okay.
Puneet, I'm so sorry to do this to you, but we are so running up on time here. We need to have you back and go even more in depth into Amberflo. But yeah, we have a show coming up after us, and unfortunately, we're just running short on time. Any last thoughts though before we close out today?
Very cool. No, this is, I think, let me just take literally 30 seconds, just clue users into the pricing side. So I've now jumped into the pricing plan. You can construct any kind of a pricing plan that you wish, as we talked about, seat-based, usage-based, prepaid. Once you have the pricing plan, you can go to the customer dashboard. You can basically see real-time invoices being generated, and you can provide invoices back to your customers. We also have what we call the customer portal, so you can actually project these invoices back to your customers in a portal. So that's sort of the overview. But yeah, we'd love to be back. I know you're
so much to discuss. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Tala, Puneet, Syed, of course. Billing is such a deep and amazing topic, and it affects all of us when we're building out SaaS. So definitely think it would be great to have you back on again. Very much enjoyed it. I'm going to go ahead and start closing out here. So I'll go ahead and take everybody off stage, and thank you again for being here. For those of you that are joining us here on Twitch today, thank you for being here, being a part of our little family, and make sure and jump back with us in 2 weeks, where we'll have another episode where we'll be digging into even more information about cost per tenant. Remember, we talked about that a little bit earlier. So with that said, make sure and join us again in 2 weeks. And until then, everyone, happy building to you all. Bye-bye.